Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for coming today to discuss the budget. As you know, in 2014, Washington experienced the largest and worst fire in our state history, the Carlton Complex. In 2015, as we were still recovering from the Carlton Complex, Washington was hit hard again, this time even harder, and experienced the worst fire season in the history of our state. In 1 month, more than 1 million acres of Washington burned. That's an area larger than the size of the state of Rhode Island. And according to economic loss and the loss of homes and business we experienced were quite tragic, but on top of that, firefighters were killed and another was severely burned in an entrapment. The Colville tribe lost 20% of its timber. That was about $1 billion worth of timber. And I spent last summer traveling the state, meeting with firefighters and residents, and to talk about everything from the evacuation process to loss of their homes to numerous things that policymakers can do to help so that fewer homes burn down, so that we keep our firefighters safe, and to decrease the intensity of these fires so that we can be better managed. So I appreciate that the committee and my colleague, Senator Barrasso, attended a field hearing in Seattle to talk about these issues as well. And all of this underscores the importance of addressing these issues and getting the right solutions. We need to better protect our communities and our firefighters from these wildfires. And guided by science, we need to invest in and pursue the policies that will make our forests more resilient to these wildfires. We need more equipment and more efficient use of existing resources to have a more hasty response at the initial attack to these fires. Fortunately, as you can see from the chart behind me, maybe we need to move that up a little further. My colleague, Senator Murkowski, mentioned the Forest Service had a 60% increase in firefighting funding for this year, giving us a window to come up with more functional solutions. So we certainly appreciate the work of my colleagues in getting that 60% increase. I know that Chairwoman Murkowski's state also experienced one of its worst fire seasons in Alaska's history, and we've been working together for months to try to get ahead of this problem. We've had several hearings where we have talked about different solutions to get different results, and in particular, we need better, I believe, preparedness strategy. Better fire preparedness will reduce the risk posed to communities, our forests, and reduce the cost to our nation. Some of these estimates are that we could be spending anywhere between $2 and $4 billion a year for the next several years, given the changes that we are seeing in conditions. So we need to start, obviously, once we get the energy bill done, to focus on this issue and come up with legislation that will help all our communities. I believe that legislation should set key priorities of preparedness. We must increase our community's preparedness through activities such as hazardous fuel reduction, fire-wise programs, changing the time and function of prescribed burns, risk mapping. We also need to improve the efficiency of our operations by using aircraft when available and improving the safety of our firefighting conditions. And for us in the Northwest, it even means getting a better Doppler system just to forecast weather conditions, since we have a blind spot right in the central part of our state. We can invest in and prioritize fuel treatments that we know make a difference at risk areas such as prescribed burn and mechanical thinning. And I hope that we will in the future talk a lot about ideas to be very innovative on this. To me, it makes no sense to talk about what you do after the fires happened as much as we should be talking about what we can do to minimize the risk to everyone, but to specifically the $2 to $4 billion costs we're looking at each year from these fires. The funding that was awarded last week to groups in Washington through the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Project is a great example of this. Thank you. It will help at-risk communities with fire preparedness in places like Kittitas, Chelan, and Okanagan counties. And finally, we can increase our use of technology, including unmanned aerial vehicles and GPS, so we can more accurately see the locations of spot fires so that firefighters in the community can be sent out to help. And I look forward to working out the remaining details with many of the members of this committee, but certainly Chairwoman Murkowski, as we try to bring together legislative solutions here. Turning to secure rural schools, if I could for a moment, I want to express my concern in the delay in the distribution of the 2015 Secure Rules payments. These 2015 payments still have not been distributed to communities, And the fiscal years of counties in Washington begin in a few months, so I can't imagine some of these counties trying to plan their annual budget, not knowing how much they're going to get from the Forest Service. Skamania County, the secure rules payments represent more than 15% of their budget. So these payments and salaries of more than half of Skamania County's 65 employees. So for our rural and timber communities, these are very serious issues. So I noticed there was not a lot of detail in the administration's proposal to reauthorize the secure rule program, but nonetheless, I look forward to working with you and the chairwoman and members of this committee, including Senator Wyden, over the coming months to extend this crucial program. And I also want to thank you, Chief Tidwell, for last week's announcement concerning recreational permits. I completely agree that we need to be finding ways to streamline the Forest Service processes in order to make it easier for more young people to get outdoors. I know Secretary Jewell announced a similar proposal across all interior lands programs. And it was right here in this room that last year's budget hearing when you and I talked about the problems with the YMCA of Greater Seattle and the Forest Service, and I'm delighted to hear that you and Secretary Jewell are embarking on what I think is a very significant process to make it easier for young people like the YMCA to move through the current permit process and open the doors to hundreds of young people and organizations. And so despite the good points, there are gaps in this year's budget request, and we should work to address these so we can do more to work together on recreational access. Small businesses in my state that rely on recreational economy are confused about some of the priorities in the budget. For example, the Forest Service is proposing to cut road maintenance and is currently exploring ways to close some of the major recreational routes in my state. So we're going to hear loudly from people on this, so we hope we can ask a question and get some details on that. In the same budget, the agency is proposing significant increases in new roads, so people are trying to understand the new roads versus maintenance. And without much of an explanation, we want to understand how we make sure that these priorities are met on both sides. And I want to take a point of personal privilege, if I could, and conclude my remarks by recognizing the passing of my cousin, Sheila Cantwell. She was, like many of the Forest Service employees, dedicated to her career. She served 23 years in the Forest Service working for the Mount Whitney Ranger Station in Lone Pine. So like many other people in the Forest Service, they do their work, they love their job. And so I want to thank all the people of the Forest Service for their hard work and dedication, and I turn that back to you, Senator Murkowski.